My name is Leah Patterson. I'm 36 years old and I live in the northern suburbs of Seattle, where every spring morning is filled with the scent of blooming flowers and memories of a more peaceful time. I'm the only daughter of Henry Patterson, a renowned architect who spent his life building not just beautiful structures, but also the person I am today. I used to have a stable life, a small flower shop downtown, a loving husband, or at least I thought so. But 3 years ago, I lost them both. My husband cheated with his secretary, and my father quietly began his battle with cancer. After the divorce, I moved back into the estate I grew up in, not to escape, but to care for my father in his final months. Among the flower beds he planted by hand, I found myself again. And then he passed away. I thought the worst was behind me, until one morning, the woman who wrecked my marriage, now my ex-husband's new wife, stepped into my father's garden with one clear goal: to take what never belonged to her. The suburban Seattle morning was still damp with dew as I knelt trimming the blue hydrangeas along my father's porch. The scent of fresh soil and flowers floated on the breeze, offering a moment of calm, even as the grief of his loss lingered. But the sharp click of expensive heels shattered the peace like glass. I didn't need to look up to know who was walking across the flagstone path. Vanessa. No one else would dare wear gleaming Gucci heels to stomp through the garden my father lovingly tended all his life. "But Leah," she called, her voice sweeter than the frosting on the wedding cake she stole from behind my back. "I think it's time we had a grown-up conversation, don't you?" I kept pruning, ignoring the sound of her heels crushing the fresh leaves. My father had planted these hydrangeas for my mother's 40th birthday, before she passed away. "About what?" I asked, standing and brushing off the bits of soil from my gardening apron. Vanessa stepped closer, her shadow blocking the sunlight over the flower bed. "About the estate. This house. About how Holden and I deserve a fair share." I blinked. Her tone had shifted, sharp like a knock at midnight. "A fair share?" I repeated, voice cold as ice. "This is my father's home. He built every brick with his own hands, designed every inch himself. You and Holden have no claim." "Leah, don't be childish." Vanessa tilted her head, her honey blonde curls falling perfectly over her shoulder. "Holden was part of Henry's life for 12 years. They golfed every weekend, rang in New Year's together. Your father even called him his second son. So why shouldn't we get something?" I gripped the pruning shears tighter in my hand. "This is the same man who betrayed me with his secretary, who happens to be his new wife," I said, never breaking eye contact. "My father may have been polite, but he wasn't a fool." Vanessa laughed, short, sharp, like shattering crystal. "Sure, Henry was smart, but he also had a soft heart. He wanted people taken care of after he passed. This house, his assets, they shouldn't all go to you alone." I looked around at the garden, the space my father spent decades nurturing, mowing every summer, hanging lanterns every holiday. "You're standing on sacred ground," I said, each word heavy in the air. "I don't know what scheme you and Holden are running, but I promise nothing will come to you easily." Vanessa smirked. "Don't be so sure, Leah. I spoke with Holden's attorney this morning and—" She leaned in, whispering like sharing a secret. "Your brother Darren thinks we deserve a share too." A chill raced down my spine. Darren? My half-brother who'd kept his distance since the funeral? Who hadn't even called since Dad passed? I tried to stay composed. "Get off my property, Vanessa, before I forget how to be civil." She shrugged and stepped back toward the gate. "Oh, don't worry. I'll be back. After the will reading. And you might want to start packing. Holden hates this whole vintage aesthetic." I stood there, watching her disappear beyond the iron gate, the sharp click of her heels fading like a challenge hurled over her shoulder. A breeze swept through the hydrangeas, shaking loose a single, pristine white petal. I picked it up, my hand trembling, not from fear. She thought she could walk in here, trample over my grief, and claim everything? Raw. This was my father's chessboard. and I was the one holding the final move. I don't remember how long I stood there after Vanessa left. Maybe a few minutes, maybe an hour, but the feeling was unmistakable, cold, stunned, furious. Darren, my half-brother, the one who carried me piggyback when I sprained my ankle in 5th grade, the one who drove me to prom in his beat-up truck after my date bailed last minute. The last person I'd ever expect to take Vanessa's side. And yet, he had. If what she said was true, he hadn't just taken sides. He'd helped them go after my father's estate. I pulled out my phone, my fingers still sticky with sap and dirt, and dialed Kira, my best friend from college and a probate attorney. She picked up after 3 rings. Leah, what's going on? Kira, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think I'm in the middle of a dirty game, and the first move came from Darren. She paused. I'm on my way. Don't sign anything. And don't say another word to Vanessa. Kira arrived 25 minutes later, still in her navy pantsuit and sunglasses, looking like she walked straight out of a King County courtroom, but her eyes were all business. I just got an email from the clerk's office, she said as she stepped inside. A provisional copy of the will's been filed, and Leah, Holden's name is listed as a beneficiary. I nearly collapsed onto the couch. What? And not just him. Vanessa, too. As the legal spouse of Holden Patterson? The air thickened around me. What about me? What do I get? Kira opened her laptop, fingers flying over the keys. You're still listed, but your share is only 45%. I shook my head in disbelief. No way. My dad would never. Not in a million years. A codicil was submitted 4 weeks ago. The signature is Henry Patterson's, and the person who filed it is Darren Patterson. My heart pounded in my chest. That was a punch I never saw coming. At that moment, Kira pulled a slim file folder from her bag. I quietly started an internal audit when your dad was hospitalized for the last time. Just a professional hunch, but now I think we've got a much bigger problem. She laid out several bank statements on the table. I glanced over them. There were cash withdrawals from my father's account on the exact days he was unconscious in the hospital. The authorized representative in these transactions, Kira pointed to a signature, was Darren. He was appointed temporary guardian during the 2 days Mr. Henry slipped into a coma, and he used that time to alter legal documents. I could barely breathe. Worse, Kira said, her voice lower. Part of your father's assets? Specifically, the usage rights to the Bellevue office building were used as collateral, and the loan was issued to a company under Holden's name. My throat tightened. A company registered to my ex-husband. Kira continued. Vanessa didn't just show up to demand a share. She came to claim what they believe is already in motion. Leah, this has been in the works for a long time. I stood up and stepped out onto the balcony. The evening breeze hit me, sending a chill down my spine. Memories of family dinners, Christmas nights with jazz playing. All of it felt distorted now. They'd dealt me into a rigged game, and I hadn't even seen all their cards. Are you ready for the next part? Kira asked as I returned inside. She'd opened a new document on her screen. What now? I asked, my voice dry. Darren just sold 10% of your father's real estate company to an investment firm called Rowan Creek Holdings. I frowned. That sounds familiar, because it used to go by another name, one where Holden served as chief financial officer. My heart skipped a beat. Ex-husband, new wife, half-brother. 3 people, 1 objective, 1 trap. We have to do something, I whispered, gripping the edge of the table. Not just something, Kira said, eyes blazing. I think your dad had a plan B, but we need to find it fast. I looked out toward the garden, remembering my father's words. There's no such thing as randomness in a good garden. Everything has a purpose, even the thorns. Now I understood. Maybe he left behind a way out. Or another trap. I stayed up the entire night. Not from fear, but from rage. And something harder to name, a kind of ache that only comes when betrayal hits close to home. Kira spent the night on my couch, anchoring me from drifting into chaos. She curled up in the reading room while I wandered the halls of our old house, each step like moving through a maze of memories. Around 5 a.m., as the sky turned a pale ash gray outside the window, I stepped into the back garden, where my father used to sit with his black tea, a copy of Architectural Digest, and his old ukulele beside the wicker chair. And that's when I saw it. Nestled within the thick lavender bushes, which I always thought were planted to repel mosquitoes, was a slightly crooked stone along the garden path. No one would have noticed it, except someone who had spent hours pruning branches and clearing leaves here, like me, or my dad. I crouched down and lifted the stone. Underneath it was a small metal box, rusted at the edges, but still sealed tight. Inside, I found a handwritten letter, the penmanship strong but shaky, unmistakably his, and a small brass key, delicate and ornate, with a hand-etched message. Don't let anyone rewrite your story. I returned inside, clutching the metal box like I was holding a piece of his soul. Kira was awake. She didn't ask anything, just poured me a cup of black coffee and nodded when I handed her the letter. I opened it. My heart pounded. And if you're reading this, then things have unfolded just as I feared. And as I expected. I couldn't stop Darren or Holden, but I could leave you the truth. This key opens the third drawer on the left in the design studio, where I kept my final blueprints. Inside, you'll find what you need: documents, photos, statements, and enough evidence to expose everything. Remember what I always taught you about chess? To protect the queen, sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn. But you're no pawn, Leah. You're the one who ends the game. Yeah. I looked at Kira, the design studio. She nodded. Let's go. ChatGPT de no. The old workshop sat at the far end of the garden, hidden behind wild grapevines and a row of late-blooming crepe myrtles. My father always kept it locked, said it was a place where he could create freely, undisturbed by reality. The key slid perfectly into the lock. When the door opened, the scent of wood, oil paint, and menthol tobacco hit us like his spirit was still hovering in the air. Kira turned on her flashlight. The room was cluttered with papers, scale models, technical drawings, but our target was the oak desk in the center, the one with 3 large drawers on the left side. I inserted the key. The soft click sounded faint, but in my chest it roared like a bell of justice. Inside the drawer was a thick envelope, a black USB drive, a portable hard drive, and a stack of photographs held together with a brass clip. I pulled the photos out first, one by one, and my heart sank into my stomach. Photos of Vanessa sitting with a man in a black suit, Darren's former personal attorney. Another showed Holden leaving the headquarters of Rowan Creek Holdings, holding a folder marked confidential. But the final photo made Kira gasp. Darren shaking hands with the current CFO of Harrison Developments. The same man my father had fired 6 months ago for falsifying reports. Kira grabbed the USB. We need to see what's on this. Back in the home office, I plugged the USB into my laptop. Inside was a video, filmed with a hidden camera, capturing a conversation in my father's office just 3 weeks before he passed away. In the video, Darren said, "Dad, if you don't amend the will, Vanessa's going to blow this up. She's already got evidence of Harrison's unauthorized investments from back in 2011. My father responded, "You're letting yourself be manipulated, Darren. Don't let greed make you forget your own blood." Then Holden's voice entered from the corner of the room. "Mr. Henry, we're just asking for what's fair. Leah isn't the only one entitled to inherit." My father scoffed. "Leah is the only one who deserves it. And as for the rest of you," he looked directly into the hidden camera, "you'll soon understand. I'm not playing this game alone." Kira turned to me. "Leah." He knew, he anticipated every move. I whispered, my voice trembling. "And he turned their scheme into evidence." I stood, my eyes fixed on the screen. On my father's face. Strong, calm, clear. The game they thought they were running? He'd flipped the board before it ever started. "What now?" I asked. Kira picked up the hard drive, her eyes sparkling like fire. "Now it's our turn." That evening, as the garden lights flickered on, casting golden hues across the lavender, a car pulled up outside the gate. I recognized the license plate immediately. It was Darren. Kira squinted through the curtain. "Want me to stay?" I shook my head. "This is between me and him, but keep your phone on you, in case I need a live witness." She nodded and disappeared toward the back, quiet as an attorney preparing for the biggest case of her life. Darren walked in looking gaunt, wearing a wrinkled gray suit and holding a weathered leather bag like it weighed more than his conscience. I didn't invite him to sit, there was no need. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice stripped of every ounce of old warmth. Darren exhaled and set the bag on the table, then looked up. Eyes tired, but clear. "To explain, and to give you what Dad wanted you to have." I frowned, gripping the armrest. "So you really did side with them?" He didn't respond right away. Instead, he opened the bag, pulled out a small voice recorder, and a bundle of files tied with twine. "I pretended to side with them. From the beginning, Leah," he looked at me, truly looked at me, like a brother for the first time in years. "It was what Dad asked me to do." The air in the room seemed to freeze. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Darren pressed play. The first voice was Vanessa's, sharp as a razor. "After the old man dies, Leah will crumble. She's weak, easy to steer. You just need to show up and nudge her off the inheritance table." Then Holden's voice, low and cold. "If she resists, we'll plant fake evidence, make her look mentally unstable. Darren, all we need is your testimony that her dad wasn't in sound mind when he signed the will. We'll take care of the rest." My throat went dry. Every nerve in my body burned. "You recorded all these conversations?" I asked, barely able to speak. Darren nodded, pulling a micro SD card from the bag's side pocket. "Dad suspected Holden and Vanessa over a year ago, but he didn't want a direct confrontation. He said we needed time for them to trap themselves and someone on the inside." I stepped back, my heart pounding. "So all of this, everything you did, was fake?" "Not entirely," Darwin said, his eyes darkening. "I was angry when Dad handed the company to you instead of me. I had accepted being sidelined until he asked me to meet privately. He gave me a choice, walk away with a token payout, or help him protect what really belonged to you." I froze. "And you chose the game." He nodded. "It wasn't easy. For 3 months I lived a double life, pretending to be on their side, all while feeding information back to Dad. Everything you found in the design studio? It's from that time." He pushed the file toward me. "This includes documents Vanessa and Holden don't know I copied. Fake transfer agreements, internal emails, debt transfer plans, including the attempt to sell your share through a shell company Holden controlled." I couldn't speak. "I'm sorry," Darren said quietly, "for not telling you sooner. But Dad wanted them to expose themselves when they thought they'd already won." I remembered my father's words in the letter. "Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to protect the queen." I wasn't the pawn. I was the checkmate. As Vanessa and Holden were escorted out of the office, their faces pale as paper, the camera crew kept rolling. Because Miranda never gave the order to stop filming. "You wanted to capture a historic moment," I said, looking at Vanessa one last time. "I hope that footage is worth it." The door slammed shut behind them. The room was silent. "There's one more thing," Darren said, pulling out a sealed envelope. "Dad wrote this for you. But he told me to give it to you only once you knew the truth." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Leah, by the time you read this, you've likely experienced what a true heir must face. Loneliness, betrayal, and trials from those you share blood with. But I believe in you. I believe you have the strength not only to protect what's been left behind, but to continue the story with your own power." Darren was wrong, but he made the right choice when it mattered. Forgive him if you're ready. If not, keep walking forward. And remember this: beauty planted in truth will never wither. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. Not everyone gets to see the true faces of the people they once shared dinners with, once sat beside under the same roof. That I had seen them, and survived. "Leah," Darren said softly, "it's all in your hands now. You can end this, or turn it into a new beginning." I took a deep breath and stood up. "Stay the night," I told him. "Tomorrow we end this game. Publicly. Clearly. No more shadows." From the next room, Kira emerged, her eyes sharp as lasers. "Rep the legal documents," she said firmly, "because tomorrow morning, we're making sure they have no way out." That morning, the sky over Seattle was eerily clear, as if even the weather knew that justice was about to be named. The will reading was held at attorney Miranda Cross's office, the same place where my father had prepared all his estate documents. The main conference room was cleared, meticulously arranged, cameras, lighting, legal witnesses. Everything was staged like a grand reveal. Because Vanessa had hired a full film crew to record her so-called historic moment. I sat in the front row, flanked by Kira and Darren. Both were silent, but their eyes gleamed like loaded weapons. The door swung open. Vanessa entered first, a tight white blazer dress, makeup flawless, her smile cold and rehearsed. Holden followed behind, more subdued but no less self-assured. "Leah," Holden nodded. "It's been a while." I answered with a direct stare, no nod, no words. Vanessa pulled out a chair and turned to the camera. "Make sure it's rolling, all right? I want everything recorded. Proof that justice leaves no one behind." I pressed my lips together. No one stopped them, because they were walking straight into the trap my father had set. Miranda, my father's attorney, entered right on time, carrying a deep brown briefcase and a sealed red wax envelope. She didn't smile, she didn't greet anyone. "We'll begin," she said, her voice as sharp as a cold blade. Everyone sat up straight. "I, Miranda Cross, acting under the legal authority of Mr. Henry Patterson, will read the last will and testament dated February 18th, along with a legally binding codicil signed on March 14th, 3 days before his passing." Vanessa smiled like she'd just hit the jackpot. Miranda opened the main document. In the original will, assets are distributed as follows: 45% to Leah Patterson, 40% split between Holden Patterson and Vanessa Lake Patterson, and the remaining 15% directed to the Patterson Family Scholarship Fund. Vanessa clapped lightly. "I knew he wouldn't forget us. Henry was always fair." Holden exhaled. "So he finally saw..." "Still sharp." "We're not finished," Miranda cut in, and opened the red envelope. "As stated, there is a valid codicil, signed privately by Mr. Henry in the presence of 3 witnesses and a licensed notary, and the clause within changes everything." Vanessa frowned. Holden glanced at me, his confidence beginning to crack. "The clause is triggered the moment any beneficiary verbally agrees to accept the terms of the original will," Miranda said, pulling out another document and holding it up. "And since both of you have just done so, on video and audio recording, I will now read the contents of the codicil." The air in the room was stripped of oxygen. "All inheritance assigned to Holden and Vanessa is immediately revoked, and the entire estate of Mr. Henry Patterson, including real estate, company shares, and investment assets, is to be transferred in full to Leah Patterson, with a small trust designated for community scholarships." Vanessa shot up. "What? This is fraud." Miranda didn't blink. "Furthermore, any disinherited party under this clause shall be investigated and prosecuted if evidence of manipulation, fraud, or inheritance scheme is found." Kira pulled another envelope from her bag, containing copies of the photos, recordings, and documents we had uncovered. She dropped it on the table like an ace card. "Here's the evidence," she said. "Recordings of secret meetings, photos of Vanessa and Holden meeting with the shell company director, forged transfer contracts, a plan to fabricate Mr. Henry's mental incompetence, and..." She stared directly into the camera. A clip where Holden calls Leah the weakest and easiest to eliminate in the family. Vanessa lost it. No, this is entrapment. This is made up. On the contrary, Darren said, speaking for the first time. You were the ones setting the trap, and our father let you think you'd won, but he never left the game. Holden turned pale, his lips cracked dry. Miranda continued. The materials have already been submitted to the district attorney's office. And under Washington state law, any fraudulent action involving inheritance may be subject to criminal prosecution. Vanessa slammed her hands on the table, standing abruptly. I'll sue all of you. Good luck with that, Kira said with a shrug. But if I were you, I'd get my statement ready for the FBI first. I turned to Kira and Darren. Dad built a chess game with only one ending. Darren nodded. And you made the final move. 2 weeks after that fateful will reading, the preliminary hearing at King County Court officially began. I sat beside Kira and Darren in the plaintiff's section, my face cold as stone, though inside me churned a storm that hadn't calmed since the day Vanessa stomped her heels through my father's garden. Across the courtroom, Vanessa appeared in a light orange jumpsuit, no longer the powerful blonde executive, but a disgraced woman, lightly handcuffed but unmistakably fallen. Holden sat beside her, not cuffed but ghost pale, his eyes avoiding everyone's. He had signed a cooperation agreement in exchange for a reduced sentence. Judge Claire Whitman, a stern woman with silver hair swept into a tight bun, glanced over the case files and struck her gavel. We will begin. The prosecutor stepped forward, voice firm and clear. Your Honor, the prosecution presents evidence of fraud, forgery of inheritance documents, conspiracy to commit estate theft, and the attempted misappropriation of assets valued in the millions of dollars. From the rightful heir, Ms. Leah Patterson. I rose as I was called to the stand. Please describe your relationship with the two defendants. I looked directly at Vanessa. Vanessa destroyed my marriage by getting involved with Holden, my ex-husband, while she was still his assistant. 6 months after our divorce, they got married. 3 months after that, they began cozying up to my father. The courtroom was dead silent. When my father passed away, I thought I had lost everything, but in reality, what I lost was just the surface. That loss led me straight to the truth. I turned toward Holden, who stared at the floor. Holden and Vanessa orchestrated fake contracts, shady meetings, and a smear campaign designed to make me appear unfit to manage my father's estate. As I left the witness stand, the prosecutor raised a hand. Our next exhibit. An audio recording from defendant Vanessa herself, detailing her full plan. The room echoed with her voice over the speaker system. Once sugary sweet, now sharp as a blade. Once Leah's out of the picture, I'll take over everything. She's predictable. If needed, we'll hire a psych expert to claim she's unstable. One slip-up is all it takes to strip her of the inheritance. Holden, and if she doesn't back down? Vanessa, once the plan's done, she won't be a problem. A minor accident, who would question it? The room froze. The judge nodded to security. 2 officers moved forward as Vanessa began thrashing. This is a setup, it's fake. Leah framed me. Calm down, defendant, the judge warned. All materials have been verified and legally submitted. Vanessa snapped her head toward me, screaming, You think you've won, Leah? I made your husband leave you. I took everything from you. You did, I replied evenly. But today, all you have left is the truth. As security led her off the stand, the prosecutor continued. And now, Your Honor, the most shocking revelation. The true identity of defendant Vanessa Lake. He opened a fresh folder. Legal name, Margaret Phillips. Wanted in 2 other states for financial fraud, identity theft, and estate manipulation through fraudulent marriage. The room erupted in whispers. I caught a reporter murmuring, Oh my God, this is a federal scam. The federal court has agreed to take jurisdiction. The FBI confirms Margaret Phillips targeted at least 3 other families over the past 8 years, but this is the first time she went as far as plotting physical harm to the primary heir. Holden, now visibly trembling, stood. I didn't know her real identity. I was manipulated. But I've turned over all email records, printouts, contracts. I'm fully cooperating. The judge nodded and made a note. The prosecutor continued. With the current body of evidence, we request the court sentence Margaret Phillips to the maximum penalty and transfer the case to federal jurisdiction. The rear door opened. Federal agents in black suits entered. A second pair of handcuffs was secured around Vanessa's wrist as she was led out of the courtroom. Her makeup had faded, but her glare burned with venom. She turned for one last look. "I'll be back." "No," I said, rising to my feet. "You'll never set foot here again." After the hearing, Kira, Darren, and I stepped out of the courthouse. The chilly afternoon wind whipped across the stone steps, scattering a few reporters' note cards. I looked up at the sky, vast and blue, like it hadn't been in ages. "One step done," Kira said. "But it's not over yet." I nodded. "I know. Now it's time to rebuild." 3 days after the hearing, I returned to my father's home, the place where everything began, and where I hoped the last chapter of this chaos would close. The house was unusually quiet. No more footsteps laced with lies, no more voices as sweet as poison. Just the wind rustling through the windows, leaves dancing outside, and the faint scent of lavender in the air. Darren had gone back to Montana to tend to his business. Kira had returned to her law office downtown. They'd both suggested I take a few days off, but I couldn't. Not when this feeling of incompletion still weighed on me. I stood in front of my father's greenhouse, the one where he spent hours each week tending to rare orchids, prized roses, and other flowers I never learned the names of. I used to think it was just a lonely old man's hobby. But today, I walked in as if stepping into a sacred place, with the gut feeling that something was waiting for me. The greenhouse door still opened with the old brass key hanging by the porch. No one ever replaced it, because no one else ever needed to go in. The air inside was warm, humid, and alive. The flowers bloomed, pot after pot, as if they'd never even heard the name Vanessa. I walked toward the wooden bench he used for pruning. Right there, in the center, was a cream envelope, tied with twine. The handwriting on it was unmistakable. "For Leah, only when everything is over." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter and a stack of documents, including a land deed for the lot next to my old flower shop in Fremont, which I had closed down 3 years ago to care for Dad. I read the letter, and every word pierced straight to my heart. "My dearest Leah, I know that by the time you read this, you've overcome far more than I ever wanted you to face." My father saw the signs, the change in Darren's eyes, Holden's forced charm, and Vanessa, who always looked at our garden as an investment, not a piece of memory. He couldn't stop everything, but he did one thing. He left me something no one could ever steal: the right to keep blooming. This land, he bought it under someone else's name 2 years ago. It sits right next to my old flower shop. The building permit had already been approved. An investment account had been opened in my name. All it needed was my signature to activate. He called it Harrison Grove, a place where the wounded could rediscover life through soil, through plants, through flowers. And if I was ready, I should open it, not just as a store, but as a space where I could help others bloom again. I love you, Leah, not because you're strong or able to endure pain, but because you always choose the light, even when the darkness is easier. Don't let pain imprison you. Let it be the soil you grow from. Dad. I sat there in silence, the letter resting on my lap, my hand gripping the deed. My father didn't just leave me assets or justice. He left me a doorway to freedom. That afternoon, I visited Fremont, where my old flower shop had once been a vibrant little corner of the city. Now, the land next to it was empty, fenced off in white, with a weathered sign that read, "Awaiting redevelopment." I walked up, placed my hand on the fence. In my mind, I could already see the future garden, A modern glass shop, a quiet workshop for introverts to learn floral design, a cozy corner with tea and dried flowers, and a hand-painted sign hanging at the gate. Harrison Grove, where you can bloom again. My father's dream had become a legacy. Now it was my turn to bring it to life. When I got home, Kira was already waiting in the kitchen, 2 glasses of wine poured. "I get the feeling you found something," she smiled, as if reading my thoughts. I handed her the paperwork. He prepared everything, not just to protect me, but to free me. Kira lifted her glass. "Then this is a beginning. No more inheritance fights, no more power games, just what Leah was truly born to do." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long time I smiled. Not because I had won, but because I had come back to myself. 3 months after the final trial, Margaret Phillips, who once hid behind the name Vanessa Lake, was sentenced to life in prison with no parole. The federal court found her guilty on 18 counts, including organized fraud, identity theft, large-scale estate conspiracy, and, most seriously, the intent to harm a legal heir. Bolden, as a co-conspirator and cooperating witness, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In his final statement, he admitted that he knew Margaret wasn't just after wealth. He knew that if the plan worked, I wouldn't just lose my home, I could have lost my life. When the sentence was read, I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. A cold kind of peace. Like early spring, when snow melts and the soil softens again. 1 week later, Harrison Grove officially opened. The ceremony was small, simple. No red ribbons or champagne. Just me, Kira, Darren, and a small circle of guests. A few neighbors, 3 longtime clients from my old shop, and one special woman. Eloise Kramer, a woman in her 70s whom my father once helped rebuild her home after a storm in 1999. She stood before the newly planted lavender, her eyes soft and wet. Once told me, flowers aren't just for sale. They're for remembering, for healing. You've done that, Leah. I smiled, tearful, holding her hand. I'm just walking the road he started. Harrison Grove isn't just a flower shop. It's a living space. There's a community garden for anyone who's experienced loss. A small classroom inside hosts floral art classes, where I guide middle-aged women once cast aside back into their creativity. Out back, there's a cozy studio where Kira and I lead support groups for financial fraud survivors, a program we call Root Again. Darren, with both construction skills and a newly cleansed heart, manages the grounds and helped design the secondary greenhouse. "Working with flowers helps quiet my mind," he said. I understood that better than anyone. That afternoon, after most guests had left, I walked the garden alone. Past the soft lavender, the rows of blue asters, and the antique roses. The very ones my father loved most. I stopped at a blooming white rosebush, glowing in the golden hour. In its center, a small wooden plaque, read, "For Leah, who taught her father that the strongest flowers grow from blood-soaked soil." I don't know who placed it there. Maybe Darren, maybe Kira, maybe my father designed it before he passed. But I knew this much: I was no longer the same woman. Not the betrayed wife, not the forgotten daughter, not the woman pushed out of her marriage and her own life. I am the one who stood back up, walked through the wreckage, and replanted dreams from what was left. That night, I received an express letter, no return address, just one line on the envelope. "Congratulations on surviving." Inside was a single handwritten note. "I know you think I only wanted to hurt you, but the truth is, I was jealous. You had something I never did, a father who loved you unconditionally. You didn't just inherit assets, you inherited what I lost as a child, a place to belong." Signed, Margaret. I folded the letter and burned it in the greenhouse stove. Not out of hate, but because that kind of darkness didn't belong here, not in a place made for light, rebirth, and new growth. As I stepped out of the greenhouse, the Seattle sky was full of stars, a rare sight. Each small light reminded me, even in the darkest night, truth and beauty still exist. I looked out at the garden, flowers swaying in the breeze, paths paved with old stones my father left behind, and people, once broken, now learning to smile again. This isn't just where I live. This is a legacy. And I, Leah Patterson, am no longer anyone's victim. I am the one who writes the ending, and the one who plants the beginning of what comes next. Leah Patterson's story isn't just a fight for justice. It's a powerful reminder that even after betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, each of us can rise, rebuild, and bloom again from what was once broken. In real life, we can't always control who hurts us, but we always have the right to choose how we respond. Justice doesn't always come early, but when it does, it brings light, and sometimes even a new garden to start over. What do you think about Leah's journey and how she overcame everything? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family, justice, and rebirth.